Hello, everyone. I'm so delighted that we're all here together. Can you feel the cosmic connection? Can you feel the heart connection? Can you feel the soul connection? Can you feel that web of light that goes around the world? Can you feel all of the dimensions of what that means in your life and how it's moved in you and through you and lives as you, whether you are always aware of it or not? So I'm so very happy that we're all together today, and it feels especially powerful because we're going to be talking about our own lives today. Fabienne is going to take one of the lead stories in that, talk about how experiences and events of our lives actually hold the energy field of shifting everything in our lives. And I don't know if you've ever thought of it in that way exactly. Sometimes we think of it a lot more in the dimensions of time, things that happened in the past or things that might happen in the future, and where I'm and what's going on now. But I want us to shift into a more vertical awareness of oneness, how we live all of it, always, already. Every moment of our life is part of that eternal now. We don't normally perceive of it that way. In fact, we're probably not capable of perceiving of it that way. And so I'm inviting us to open into a whole new perspective as we shift today into the awareness of faith and trust and how it works. And we do a bit of focus on holy wounds, or we might call them divine surprises. And that would include the things that we might say, how could God ever let this happen? So let me start off with something that's really, really important and significant. And that is the picture of Fabienne, is it the Brooklyn Bridge that we have in our picture on the email that was sent out several times Bridge. And as a reminder, the Brooklyn Bridge, it's in New York City. And if Fabienne will perhaps mention it again, but that particular picture is really important. And I would invite you also to be aware of a song that I always loved by Simon and Garfunkel. And they actually did a reunion concert in front of that bridge with some of that bridge in the background. And it was the song that I love so much is Bridge Over Troubled Waters. And we didn't put it in the YouTube, but one of the things that I would invite you to do is go on YouTube and Google Bridge Over Troubled Waters, Simon and Garfunkel, and listen to the music after the call is over and apply it to your own life. In an interesting way, this bridge represents something very, very sacred for me. And I'm just going to mention that before I let Fabienne talk about her own story, which is so significant and so transformative, not only in her life, but has been very much a part of the co-creation of Called by Love. This bridge, in a sense, for me, is a sacred symbol still unfolding in the energy field that we know as Unity of Tustin. I came to Unity of Tustin in 1993, and I was a senior minister there for 19 years. During that time, the Campus of Consciousness came into being. I may talk a little more about that. I don't know if we'll cover everything I want to talk about this month because it's huge. It's absolutely huge. And it includes the cloud of unknowing. Jennifer, you have been igniting some of that as well as Cynthia Bourgeau. And what I realize in my life is that there's this bridge that is still unfolding, still there, between Called by Love and Unity of Tustin. This month, for the second time, Unity of Tustin joined us in mailing to their list as well as our mailing to our list. Now, our last list started out with 1,938 people on our list when we did Living, Loving Legacy. I always remember that as a symbolic number for me because it is the birth year of my beloved Ron. So that is imprinted in my mind. And so we have a very significant list, and Unity of Tustin has a list of about the same size. This month, we both mail to our individual lists. And what I want to invite anyone on this call that feels that deep connection to Unity of Tustin to do after the call, if you're inclined to give a gift, a donation, which we always have had a link on our site that takes us, that takes you to giving it to Called by Love, I would invite you to give it to Unity of Tustin, and to know in your heart that this is part of building the bridge, or split it between Called by Love and Unity of Tustin. But that is completely up to you, or accept the call as a gift of our love. That is completely up to you. So that is just a way that we can actually acknowledge and be very, very aware that every thought that we have, every breath that we take, every experience in our life is holding for us an invitation. It's an invitation to let God be God. It's an invitation to see God in every single moment of our life. And that includes everything, absolutely everything. It includes seeing God in all of the things going on in the world. That would include the pandemic. That would include politics. That would include all of the good, the true, and the beautiful that you identify as the good, the true, the beautiful. What I'm inviting us to do today is to begin to see that these dimensions exist in everything. They have existed eternally in your life. If you have an awareness of reincarnation, in all of your lives. And they have existed in all of the years of your life, in all of the stages of your life, in all of the cycles of your life. And this is something that, a phrase that I picked up just yesterday from listening to a call by someone that is one of the clearest transmitters of message that I've heard in a long, long time. Her message is something that I hear the words of spirit in. Her name is Sarah, S-A-R-A, Landon. And I'm not going to go into that because I'm in the process of integrating what that may mean in my life myself. But she used a sentence, and I immediately wrote it down as I listened to a call from her yesterday. Different levels of consciousness create different experiences. Now, you may think that that means your past. When you think of past, present, and future as one, future time, now in the human plane moment, that happens to be September 15, Wednesday, or past, as, did I say past already? I can't remember. Isn't that fascinating? Because your memory, in fact, dissolves into awareness of now. Past, present, and future as one. One of my awarenesses that I will never forget, Ed Rabel was an amazing Bible scholar and teacher at seminary when I was there. And he used to say something that is totally, totally imprinted deep in my awareness. Jesus came back from future time. So I want to ask you a question. Did the Jesus in you come back from future time? Are you here called by purpose, called by awareness, or fill in whatever word fits for you, called by love fits for me, to co-create on this plane part of what will heal not only your own personal life, but the world? Have you come back to save the world? Now you can make that the world within you. Are you aware that you have planets within your own consciousness? If you studied any astrology, you know that to be one of the tenets of that framework. Are you aware of them as part of your soul? Are you aware of every stage of your life, every cycle of your life as part of that? Of every person in your life as part of that? So we're going to take some deep dive questions today. If we don't get through all of them, we'll weave them into next month's call. And I'm so looking forward to not only hearing Fabienne's story, weaving in some of my own here and there, perhaps, but also having you weave in some of your own awareness of how faith and trust and how it works with holy wounds has shown up in your life. So why do some things happen? Surprises, shocks, unexpected things, change, some painful, some difficult, some fabulous, some incredible, some infecting and affecting your personal life, but also your community, your country, the world. What is a holy wound? How do we experience it? How does it change our lives without notice and unexpected, even when it's difficult? How does that happen? It's fascinating. Patty is here on the call today. Patty is the artist and creator of all of the stepping stones at site 1.5, between site 1 and 2 in the gardens. That is a glimpse of the big picture, not just at Unity of Tustin, but not just in your life, not just in the life of Unity of Tustin, not just in the life of the United States, not just in the world. It is the big picture. That's what Patty actually was inspired to co-create. to create. She was the artist behind those stepping stones. And then it became a site for prayer, for the prayer ministry. And so we may touch on that. We may go to site 2 in the meditation gardens, which is about faith and trust, and all of the Bible verses in the email that we sent relate to some of that. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for. Faith is the substance of things not seen. It's the evidence when you can't see it yet. It's the invisible. That's Hebrews 11:1. And then the one in the New Testament, which I absolutely love, a man that comes to Jesus and asks that Jesus heal his son, which Jesus does. And the man, before that happens, Jesus asks him a question: do you believe? So let me ask you the question this morning. What is your deepest hope? What is your deepest heart's yearning? Do you believe that it is already happening? That it already exists in the invisible? Do you believe that? And the man replies, I believe, help thou my unbelief. So we've got a lot to cover today and perhaps even next month. So Fabienne, come in and tell us about that beautiful, beautiful scene that we chose for the cover for our email that went out this month.
Hi, everyone. Hello again. Thank you, Marj. Well, the scene on the email cover is indeed the Brooklyn Bridge, which I believe, even from having talked to some of you here on the call, probably many of us, or at least some of us, walked over. Actually, I'll be curious, whoever walked over the Brooklyn Bridge walking? Kathy? Michaela, yeah, beautiful. This was, some of you, probably all of you by now know that I used to live in New York. At the time I had moved to New York, end of May, early June 2000. And the Brooklyn Bridge was, even before I ever moved there, a place that I had loved. So the fact that Marj also connects with that and loved that song so much was the reason for the choice of that picture for the email. Do you want me to segue?
Yes.
Marj? Yeah. So
tell us how it's shown up in your life. Not only the Brooklyn Bridge, New York, but also how it's taken you into later cycles and stages of your life.
Still happening. First of all, the bridge in general, I also feel, especially this week with the anniversary, the 20th anniversary of 9/11, I was also reflecting a lot about the bridge, even between, and you talk a lot about that, Marj, the past and future, but the bridge being the now. And then also, so for time and then for space, there have been so many amazing synchronicities, even from Friday all the way to Sunday night, and another one last night, that to your question, do you believe? I was pondering how the presence of synchronicities is part of what makes me believe, because it's just like, you cannot make that up. Like, you cannot really force it into being. And actually, there was a divine mistake last week that because we had sent the email early and it was before the previous Wednesday. So Michaela, Kathy, and I had already a long conversation last week, and a beautiful unfolding, including that both of them also used to live in New York. And so thank you again both for your shares. I'd like to start with, I wrote down those words you said this morning, Marj, the vertical awareness of oneness as part of the eternal now. And so I know we're going to go back in time, but as you're asking about even the later stages and the current stage, I'd like to start with sharing a picture with you here. And this picture might seem familiar to some of you, but synchronistically, this was taken right here in California on Sunday night. And when I was with Craig, my boyfriend Craig, that many of you know, and when we noticed the light, we were just getting out, we were getting back to the car, and the light, I don't have a picture of that one, but it appeared literally as one light that curved on top of our head. And I asked, what is this? Is it related to 9/11? Because it was only one, so we were not sure. And so he said, yeah, I think it's the Nixon Library was doing a memorial. So I asked if we could go. And there were not only the light right here in California, which I certainly did not expect I would experience, but also this steel that was originally from New York. And a woman there, part of the bridge, again, because she was in our back and she didn't tell us she was taking those pictures. And then she came to us and she said, I saw you, I took some picture. I was wondering if you would like me to give you the picture. So that's the beginning of that time and that bridge between now and then. Would you like me to go into a little bit of the chronology, Marj, of then, or how would you like me
Just let
to?
spirit direct that.
It might go back and forth then, because another very beautiful thing that happened now, but was referring to then and was for me a very beautiful symbol of light, happened on Friday night. I had opened a Google Map. I was trying to retrace my steps from 20 years ago, both before going into my office and after, when I was rescued. But something really called my attention on the map. I might be able to share that with you too. No, I'm not going to worry about that. So I was 20 years ago, what I used to do most mornings, I would take the ferry from Staten Island to downtown New York, where I used to work at the Dutch Bank building. But that day I didn't, because I knew I had missed the ferry to be on time for my meeting. So instead I took a bus that was going down, like over the Verrazano Bridge. And then we have somebody coming. And then through Brooklyn, and then in a tunnel from Brooklyn and coming out of New York downtown. And I knew that I mostly knew where that was, but I wanted to see it on the map because 20 years ago, or even I hadn't never thought about looking it through really the maps where you can see like even in 3D with Google Maps. So I was looking at that and I was remembering how when I got out of the bus, the driver said it seems like an explosion happened. And we were literally coming out of the tunnel. So I was going out on my first stop, on the first stop. So as I first through the window, I see everybody looking up. And then I look up and there were all those papers flying from the sky. And I wasn't really sure what that was. But the only point of reference that I had about something falling from the sky in New York was from the New Year's on Times Square, where they have all these confetti flying. But of course, it wasn't that. I wasn't sure what it was. I thought maybe a plane lost its mail or something. I couldn't really figure it out. But anyway, I got out of the bus and started walking. And again, on Friday, I'm dotting that on the Google map. And then as I'm getting closer to the area where I used to work, I put the address 130 Liberty Street, which was literally across from the World Trade Center. So I could only see the first tower walking in, and the first one that was touched was the second, the one I couldn't see. So again, I make my way to the office and I'll get to the rest, but I want to bring the light first because that's what was so powerful on Friday. As I'm looking at the map in the current time, and I'm getting to 130 Liberty Street. Actually, I think I would like to share that with you. Give me one moment. Sorry, Marj and I left it completely open, so I wasn't exactly sure where the shares were going to go today, but I have a few things prepared just in case. So let me show this to you here. So this is downtown Manhattan, and where you see 100 Liberty Street was where I used to work at the time. And so I'm zooming in the map here. And as you can see, it's literally across from the memorial. So that's where the towers were. And then I zoom in and I'm like, what is this? This is exactly where my old building used to be. And I'm like, what is this? So I look it up and it turns out that the church that had been destroyed that day was reopening. St. Nicholas Church, which is a Greek Orthodox church, was reopening. And then I dig a little bit. I was reading a story. I felt really touched. So I light a candle as I'm reading the story. And then I was like, but if it opens today, maybe it's now. And literally in that moment, I Google it, and it was the end of the ceremony, of the candlelight ceremony, which to me was just like that. Not only it took them 20 years to have the new place and rebuild a church, but for me to find it exactly at that time is part of what makes me believe, Marj, because as much as that day I was also led to safety, I just the guidance and every year at every anniversary, I try to do something to bring more light and more healing. So the fact that they were holding a candlelight ceremony right there was very, very touching to me. So I know I keep going back. I guess we started with the bridge, so I didn't know I was going to go back and forth between then and now.
This is perfect. This is perfect, Fabienne, because that's what happens in timelessness. There is no time. So this is something that hopefully is happening for everyone here. They're getting flashes of past, flashes of future. It's all one. So go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. So, and I will say this, Craig and Marj both, and a few other people in the meantime, have encouraged me to record my full story of that day. So I will likely do this. This is not the intention of today to go into all the details and everything, but I think I will at some point record it. And so if anyone would like the more chronological version, I will at some point, maybe in the near future, when it feels aligned, I will do that.
I do want you to touch on where the door opened and
Yes.
someone said, come in.
Yes. So now you saw where I was located, and that day I still went up the stairs, the elevator at the time. The elevator was still working because we didn't know what happened. It was, so in the chronology, this happened after the first hit. And so I went to my office. Of course, the meeting was canceled, and everybody, my colleagues, we were watching a little TV that we had in the cafeteria to try to understand what happened. So as we were watching the TV, trying to understand what happened, the whole ground shook like a big earthquake. And this first thing that we immediately heard on TV to try to make sense of it, they said, it seems like the plane, they meant the first plane, exploded. So we didn't know there was a second plane. We didn't know anything, but that's when we started to evacuate. And I was with my colleague, Alex. And at first I was so shaken. She was like, don't go back to Staten Island now. Like, just come with me to Brooklyn. So we were supposed to walk over the Brooklyn Bridge to go back to our home. But as we were walking, and I'm going to skip a few parts of like looking at the towers, turning back, stopping and walking and all of that, because that was like a chunk, but to get to that part of the door. So at one point I was on my way with her to walk over the Brooklyn Bridge. And then I saw a policeman and I started to feel like maybe I should get closer to the phone. I didn't have a cell phone at the time. You know, there was just like, I was concerned that my parents, my husband at the time wanted to get some updates. So I told her, you know what, I'm feeling better now. The ferry is running. The policeman said the ferry is running. So I'm going to go back and be at home. So we split our journey. And as I was walking in the street, which is also what I was dotting on the map, say which street exactly was that. And I was walking on this street that I normally wouldn't take because I was not in the same part of where I would normally go to the ferry. And then I hear this huge noise in my back. And again, not knowing really what's going on, I think it must be a third airplane. But of course, now looking back, we know it was the first tower falling in my back. But just at the moment, I didn't even turn around to see what was happening. I just heard the noise. I tried to push myself on the side to not be in the middle of the street. Like, mine probably not have made a difference, but it did make a difference because of that, I saw a door open and someone said, come in. So someone went in before me and I followed. And I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what to do. I followed that person to the stairs, but then that person was gone and I stayed in the stair, not really knowing what to do. And then literally seconds after me, I would see the people coming in covered in dust. So I still didn't know what had happened, but turns out it was the tower. But one thing leading to another, I go downstairs in the basement of that building and then realize that it was the Federal Reserve and that I was now in what they were calling even that day, the safest building in the city. And of course I was alone, but I was surrounded with all those people that I didn't know, but I wasn't talking to anyone. And then at one point, one of the announcer, they had like a big microphone and they were like giving announcements to people, and I felt like maybe I should tell him that I'm not from here. So I did, but that was bringing a lot of caution for them, because like, attention, there are people here who are not from here. Anyway, I was in the safest building according to them. And then they organized phone lines, but lines were still not going through. But what I do want to get to is that as I was going to the phone, I saw a computer. And from the computer, I asked if I could check. And I was miraculously able to go through my emails. There was no firewall like I had in my own bank. So I was able to reassure my parents that I was fine. But the part that really touched me deeply is that on the wall that day, there was something on the wall that I have never seen before or after in the US. And it was a calendar on the wall with a city in Belgium, my own country. And I cannot explain it in any other way that it touched me. Another bridge, home. And now back to the now, and I share that with Kathy and Michaela after we talked, because just a few days ago, I found this recording of a man sharing his story, and it's an amazing story. He was in the World Trade Center himself, like even closer. But he also had the connection to Belgium, because when he couldn't reach his family, he was able to reach his niece in Belgium, who then shared the rest of the news that he was fine with his family. So again, now, then, and in between is just like all that awareness of oneness, as Marj, as you said. So a couple of hours later, everything reopened, and they gave us masks if we wanted to go out. So it's another synchronicity that these were the only 2 times in my life when masks were involved. Then to get out of the building when all the dust from the building falling had settled, but there was still that protection for the air. And of course now, in our current situation where we've been wearing masks now for a while. So there's been just like a lot of parallel, the then and now and the in between.
And in the pause moments, think about these same kinds of events in your own life.
And thank you, Patty, for the comments you shared. What I think is also extraordinary is that in a lot of the wounds and the holy wounds that we are going through, a lot of the time we are not like all in sync of living the same type of things. But now in this situation, a lot of us are, and then we were. But other situation like somebody dying or a divorce or a breakup or miscarriage or any of those other things, it's not so collective, all of us at the same time. But again, then and now, it's very much collective experience as well as the individual experience. And then how all those threads are weaving. And I know everybody has a connection with, if they were alive, with 9/11, and it's quite amazing to see how it all comes together, the connections that were before that are still there, the new connections, and then those who are not with us anymore. The other thing that came back to me in the now, but from then, is I had this idea last week. I think it was just the night before 9/11 this year. And I was looking to see if I still had any of those original emails that I sent from the Federal Reserve, and then hearing back from friends and family. And I have a couple of those original messages. And when Kathy and Michaela talked last week on our bonus call, by divine mistake, Michaela, also, you shared you nearly were there.
Notice the phrase that Fabienne just used. They were there by divine mistake. A phrase very similar to the words holy wound. So at one point, Fabienne, I want you to begin to let us know what happened to you were a vice president of human resource development for the bank, if I'm remembering right.
Yeah, I don't know if I was vice president or assistant vice president, something like that. Yes.
A very high level position, fabulous salary. And it totally changed your value structure. How did it do that?
Well, after 9/11, there was really that sense that, for me more than ever before, because I already had encountered a few deaths in friends and family, but never had I realized that for my life, it could be over from one moment to the next. And that day, it was clear that it could. And then, of course, following, and in many other ways, not just because of those situations, but then having continued with life, it's just obvious, right? I just wasn't so tuned into that until that point. So I refer to it as going into I woke up and then I went into snooze several times. Like, I would be aware of what was most important, but then I would get back to being really focused on work or this or that. And yet at the same time, that the cleanup for the towers were going on, I started to go to therapy at that time. We had something called the EAP, Employee Assistance Program, which actually is the first thing I dealt with when I went back to work in our midtown office, because I never was able to go back to that office. It got destroyed partially that day. So we had an intermediary office where I worked and helped with that. But I also, it was mandatory for human resources employee to have some support. And I'm grateful. But in that case, it opened up not only to process what was going on then, but it started to open about what was going on in my marriage at the time, and then the power of questions, right? This therapist saying, do you think that's what a marriage is supposed to be? And just like these little questions opening bigger questions. And then every year I would volunteer, or I would do something on the anniversary to commemorate, but bringing light. And one of the years, I think it was the second year, I found out there was a center, the Meta Center, that was having a full day of healing, and they were giving the oneness blessing there. So that was the first time I received the oneness blessing. And then progressively, my journey started to pull. Like on one hand, my divorce was, my marriage was not going well, but I started to have glimpses of other things. And then when the separation happened, that's when I really dived into spirituality, personal development. And I still did both in parallel for a while. I was still working in my corporate job, but I was doing that in parallel until again, circumstances in a way that I was feeling partially a disconnect. I was asking my boss at the time if I could do something else with it within still human resources. I had inquired if I could follow a coaching training and still being part of that organization. And she said, no, we don't take internal coaches. So if that's something you want to do, like that won't be internally. And they were going through a big restructuring. So that's also when we had more conversation, and then the next steps were clear. Like she said, well, we would support you if you want to go. We would then include that in the restructuration. So I was then going and someone else didn't have to go. But then that's when open, like even more so, the finding my own journey with spirituality and personal development, and then everything that led me to here 8 years ago. Yeah.
So let's talk about that time. You were in Northern California. You had a dream, you had a vision of something that was going to happen, and it was beginning to unravel a bit. And yet it was during that period of time that I read a book and immediately invited the author of that book to come to Unity of Tustin and do an intensive. And you came with him to do the intensive. And that's how you and I connected. So, and a year after that, so notice time passing in the realms that we call human. A year after that, I get a call from you. And you said, I noticed you're doing a Called by Love intensive this coming weekend. I'm completing a week of being a senior leadership coach with Tony Robbins. I'm going to be in San Diego. I would love to come back. Could I stay with you and attend the intensive, the Called by Love intensive? And I said, of course. And at that moment in time, the person who was involved in working with me most closely, was that you, Kay? I got sick.
Yes.
Kay Holgren was working most closely with me, and Kay came to me and said, I am really, really sick on a Friday night. And she said, I cannot be here tomorrow. And I looked around the room and I thought, who can step in on a moment's notice and assist me and let it carry through, continue without missing a beat. And I looked around the entire, and it was a large group of people. I looked around the entire room and I saw Fabienne and I thought, if she can be a coach for Tony Robbins, she could do this for me. And I asked her and she said, of course. She did an absolutely fabulous job. Everything Fabienne does, she does in an absolutely fabulous way. It goes along with her name, F-A-B, fabulous. And as a result of that, at the end of the gathering, which was Saturday afternoon, I was thanking people and thanked Fabienne and and laughingly sort of said, well, because she had told me she didn't know where she was going. She wasn't sure whether she would stay in Northern California, whether she would go to North Carolina, whether she would go back to Belgium, whether she might go to New York. She hadn't decided where she was going. And I said to her, well, until you make up your mind, if you want to, you can do a high-level barter with me and you can help me launch Called by Love. I mean, launch Living Loving Legacy, our first telesummit. I knew I was way in over my head with technology. I did not know how to do the technology. I was taking courses. I was doing everything I knew how to do to learn it and learn it fast. And I was not integrating it fast enough for what I knew was most important. And so, Fabienne, do you want to pick up from there and share what happened?
I think at the moment I'm not integrating fast enough.
So go into what you are into if you're willing to share that.
It's just like having dealt this whole week again with the 9/11 thing. I was purposely it's just adding a lot of additional layers that were difficult, and I can't right now. Sorry.
So notice how it works. Has this ever happened in your life? All of the additional levels. And you're reaching the point where you simply have to say, I can't do this right now. Notice that this is a natural part of a very, very holy process. It's really, really important. And this brings me into the awareness of something that Jen and I have been diving into, the cloud of unknowing. And both of us showed up for one course that Cynthia Bourgeot did online. And then we both signed up for the second one that we saw. And it was on new windows on the cloud of unknowing. So this morning, notice this morning, this is how it also works. You can't plan too far in advance. Because if you try to plan too far in advance, you have to use your human mind to do that, unless you're really, really gifted and skilled at opening into divine mind and letting God be God in you, which we will be talking about maybe later today or next month a bit. But what we are doing in this amazing, amazing process is we are entering into new realms, new modes of love. And Cynthia Bourgeot compares it to being a kind of intertidal zone, this cloud of unknowing, between levels of consciousness. And the tide is constantly rising and falling. And at low tide, you're on the beach. You are thoroughly beached in your usual way of knowing and feeling and sensing and seeing the world. At high tide, you begin to see something differently. You begin to see through your spiritual eye, which is this eye between the eyebrows and the forehead, the spiritual eye. And the beach disappears in the rising tide of this oceanic spaciousness. And what's happening is that your whole system is being overhauled. I called it, when it happened to me, it's in chapter 40 in my book, my left brain is getting rewired. Your whole system's being overhauled. And you are being invited, just like when Fabienne saw that door open on the day of 9/11, she saw a door open and heard a voice that said, "Come in." She didn't know where she was. She didn't know whether it would be safe. She didn't know what would happen. All she could see was a stairway. And the person that had guided her in or opened, caused the door to open, she didn't know which, disappeared. I would insert a question here. Was that an angel? Was that an angel? Another example of it that Cynthia Bourgeot uses, she talks about living on the coast of Maine and that she loves to sail. And that when the days are clear and the skies open and filled with sun, she can see the lighthouse in the distance. And on a sky blue, gorgeous day, she can set her sights on the lighthouse 5 miles away and sail directly to it. However, there are days when the fog comes in and the lighthouse disappears in a shroud of fog. And she can hardly see the bow of the boat that she's in. And you have to draw on different kinds of faculties or senses. Maybe it's your hearing. Maybe you hear words of love from someone. I think that happened for Ed and I at a moment in our lives. Maybe you draw on a different kind of sense that kicks in. Maybe it's the sound of an engine of a nearby boat or the sound of water coming across. You begin to get a sense of balance in your gut, the horror point. Maybe you can smell something that tells you where you are. And yet you can hunker down in the middle of exactly where you are now. And then you begin to allow yourself to open fully to that. And you can discover how you can actually find your way moment by moment, almost one moment at a time, one day at a time. What's different is that instead of looking at something in the distance like the lighthouse, you are now taking your bearings from where you are, not where you're not. Be here now. You are taking your bearings from an inner knowing. And it's leading you beyond what is a hall of mirrors that involves reason and emotion and memory and all of your personal will. It's taking you beyond your normal way of navigating into some spiritual awareness, gifts that are deep within you. You're seeing through the spiritual eye, the third eye. And that's an eye of non-dual awareness. You can't get there if you're still in judgment. If you're still trying to make somebody right and somebody wrong. If you're still trying to separate things, it's all one. So in this sense, this cloud metaphor is a perfect description of the phenomenology, Cynthia Bourgeault calls it, the phenomenology of non-dual awakening. You see God everywhere, is the way I've called it, in the all that is. That includes the pandemic. That includes the far right and the far left. That includes the realm in between. And you see how somehow it all dances and plays together. Phenomenology is an interesting word for me. It came up when I was writing my doctoral dissertation. I had done all the research and I had an instrument that I used where people talked about timeframes in their personal lives and work lives and how they lived their lives. And then I had a whole vaster section where I did personal interviews. My dissertation committee allowed me to use the first part and not the second part. The phenomenology, they said, this personal stories, could not be scientifically understood. The second part, I mean, the first part where I'd put it into time frames and into an instrument could be. So 1/3 of my research went into the dissertation and I passed with flying colors. Nothing was even challenged. And the vaster part of it I've been working on for the rest of my life. Maybe that's part of your life too. So it's a little bit like the caterpillar that goes into a cocoon. And ultimately, unless someone messes with the cocoon and tries to help the caterpillar out as it's turning into the butterfly, if someone messes with it, it'll die. But if you allow it to go through its struggle, if you allow it to find its own way of breaking through, it has its own wings and can fly. So where are you and when have you been in cocoons in your life? Because I looked at my own life before the call and I could see different cocoons several times in my life. And I could see the struggles of coming out of the cocoons and when the butterfly took wings. But then interestingly, I could see it, the repeating pattern of that at different points in my life. Another cocoon at a higher level, stages of our lives, requiring unknowing, often pain and grief, surprise, struggle. And the cocoon then, me breaking out or being broken out of, that's a better way to say it, because the personal self dissolves. And you find the wings to fly at the next levels. We gradually become adjusted to a new way of seeing. And we begin to fill in the currents of our life with divine purpose. And yet we have to endure that in-between time until something gradually emerges. And then we are lifted by our capital S self, divine self, into the next realm that's beyond where our human self was as we went into the struggle. Sometimes we never come out of those struggles, we stay in them. That can happen in jobs, it can happen in marriages, it can happen in relationships, all kinds of ways it can happen. But you can be lifted beyond what you perceived as a barrier, and it can be the secret door that fulfills this deep heart longing. And you gradually wean yourself from your ordinary mind, and you become increasingly, and this is a word used in the cloud of unknowing a lot, you become increasingly naked. Think of the moments of your life where you have known that nakedness. In your nakedness, you begin to perceive the divine. You perceive God as God. And it may be with another person, it may be with your inner being. The between two vanishes, and you know love without an opposite. So Fabienne, come back if you can and share with us where you are now.
I'm resetting the system after the circuit breaker. And I wanted to show, though, because I think it's kind of full circle, and I think we'll get to hear from some people today. But as you're talking about the butterfly and the cocoon, I just had to share this, which I also find out about on Friday, because to me that looks like a butterfly. This is on Staten Island. It's a memorial on Staten Island that they built. But as you were talking about, getting back into oneness from there, then this is full circle, right, to that light and to the next steps that are. I'll stop sharing that. Yeah. So where I am now is, I know I still have quote unquote some cleanup to do in various ways. And I also feel that, and thank you everyone for the very kind comments, that I also know I don't get stuck in those places. So the emotions come, they go, and what stays is where we started, right? The believing in the reminder of all the magic, the synchronicities, and in that way the divine presence, even in what appears as mistakes or wounds that I trust they are not. But it doesn't mean, as a human and dealing with the emotional parts, that sometimes it just needs to flush, and it needs to be part of the acceptance of that. So I accept that as part of the human experience, as I intend to continue to be more resilient and move forward in the ways I can share my gifts as well.
And notice, without planning it, without understanding it, without thinking about it, also be aware of how Fabienne and I have seamlessly moved in and out of roles, of leading, of supporting, of joining, of simply being. Sometimes it was in the silence. And sometimes it was with words. We're in different rooms. And yet I can feel the presence of each of you in exactly the same way. And we're in different rooms. We have different points of connection, different ways to honor one another, different ways that Spirit has called us to unite as one. At different points in the frameworks of time. And those moments have created memories. All of a sudden, Michaelia coming to Bear Lake popped into my awareness. Vienna, Austria, and California, Bear Lake becoming one.
And I don't know if you saw in the messages, Marj, but we have Jean from South Africa with us today.
Oh, welcome, Jean.
Or Jean, I don't know how to pronounce it.
Do you want to come on, Jean or Jean? Unmute yourself if you do.
Hello, everybody. I can unmute myself, but I'm quite dumb with computers. But it's great to be here. Thank you.
Oh, welcome. Welcome from South Africa.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, guys.
That brings into my mind the awareness of Don Beck and how important Don Beck has been in my life. He was the one that introduced me first to the spiral. And he made 63 trips to South Africa. As it was moving out of apartheid into Nelson Mandela becoming the president of the country. From 20 years in prison to becoming the president of the country. Pretty amazing. And so many times we have these moments in time where we have the chance to let God be God in our own lives, where we have the chance to shift from the fog into being able to see the lighthouse and then become the lighthouse. So I've been getting some beautiful emails from Bruce Meyer, who was actually a longtime member of Unity of Tustin. And he sent one to Called by Love. And he says, "Dear Marj, here is the latest message from Jeff to me, which really sums it all up. I am so blessed." And this is Jeff Carrera. Now, Jeff and I go way, way back, back to the days of Andrew Cohen when he came to Unity of Tustin. And when Andrew and Jeff Carrera were at Unity Village and Bruce was there. It was the first time Jeff spoke to an audience outside of his tribe. This is Jeff's message to Bruce. Drink deeply from the cup of revelation, my friend. With all my love, Jeff. On our Called by Love call several months ago, Bruce found Jeff again and signed up for his meditation course. And it's now taking him through new revelations. And so I won't go into more of that, but I'd love to have you, if any of you are willing to talk about some of these moments in your own life that you may have had come up. We have about 10 minutes left. That's not long. We'll do some more next month. How does it apply in your life? How can you see faith and trust guiding you, supporting you? So Patty Higgins, your hand is up.
Hi, I'm reminded of 9/11 at Unity. We were reading the South African author Leslie Temple Thurston's Marriage of Spirit book. And it has a process in the back of triangles that I took to heart. I have a whole notebook with hundreds of triangles where you get the polar opposite of any issue you're working on. And then you go to a higher level and see the more generalized issue that unites them both. And I did that process over and over for such a long time. And Leslie blessed us at Unity by coming from South Africa. I remember her, maybe she even came twice, but I'm a big fan of hers. And I remember our first gathering at Gail Hamley's house right after 9/11. We were all so shaken. We'd only met a couple of times before the 9/11 event happened. And Gail had the divine guidance to invite Con Erdal, a Unity member who is who's a Sufi, and his wife Aisha. So they came to our Adventure in Faith group, and we were all, some of us had bought our own copies of the Quran, and after 9/11, and if you read it from a literal point of view, it can be kind of disturbing and scary. But Con sat us down in Gail's living room it was a darkened room with candlelight. And for the whole night's meeting, we sat on our knees, shoulder by shoulder, and Con taught us how to pray Muslim style. And it was absolutely beautiful. And by praying shoulder to shoulder, touching, you felt united in spirit. So I love it whenever we have group prayers at Unity, if we can kind of cuddle up close and get shoulder to shoulder when we're praying together, to feel that uniting energy of spirit. So I just wanted to share that for those. I don't know if any of you remember those times and remember Leslie Temple Thurston, but I think there's real value in her process in today's times of separation. Thanks for letting me share.
Oh, beautiful sharing. And oh my goodness, beautiful to remember people you're mentioning. I still communicate with Brad Laughlin. Leslie is back in South Africa. They were living in Santa Fe when they came here. It was during the time that they were writing that book together. And they came here multiple times, and Brad even came after Leslie no longer did. And the gift is that these kinds of connections often become heart connections, and they don't end. So I got an email just weeks ago from Brad, and he's back in Florida from South Africa. They live now in South Africa, but he's back in Florida, and he's getting ready to do some traveling. I'm sure he would come to Unity of Tustin if he were invited. But since I'm not the one doing those invitations any longer, I can't extend that invitation. But it's amazing how these deep heart connections, and the one that Leslie and Brad brought relative to marriage of spirit also involved what they called the squares, of being able to look at what you're attracted to, what you're repelled by, what's inner, what's outer. And beautiful, beautiful example of polarities that takes in all of the dimensions of our lives. And so good, so good. And of course, someone mentioning Don Beck. See how the spirit comes in and says, this was it. This was it. I planted this seed then. It's really, really fascinating. You know, Jeff Carrera, with becoming so important in Bruce's life now. Bruce is going through a time of redefining what it means to be embodied. And notice I tried to say that in a way that leaves a bit of mystery there. And, you know, Jeff Carrera is started way back when he came to Unity of Tustin, Unity Village. You know, then I've had these intersections in time with him multiple times. And he was on Called by Love. And it's fascinating to see how spirit moves in our lives. Who else would like to share? What has come up for someone else? Either raise your hand this way or raise your hand below. Kathy, are you raising your hand?
I think so. When I first got on, I was not video ready.
All right.
But, I think the holy wounds, I think the bottom line is some amazing coincidences that, like, with the trust and the love. I was given a great gift from my brother / spirit, so that I was only really sorrowful after he died for a short time. He lived on the East Coast. He was in Massachusetts and with MIT and was at college there when I when he came out for my first marriage in 1989 or so, that he was a photographer, and he took a ride up the coast and decided before he flew back east again. And unbeknownst to me, he wanted to come back and take some pictures from the San Francisco Bay Area like a year later. And so my first summer after getting married, I worked in Denver, and then coming home, I went to the Point Reyes Peninsula being a geologist. That's where the San Andreas Fault goes off to sea. And there was one other car in the parking lot. And it was my brother. I said, and we each said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "Aren't you supposed to be?" We said, "Weren't you in Colorado?" And he said, "Aren't you?" But so there was this setting sun. All I saw was the outline of his body, and then recognized him coming towards me. And so he died in an outdoors accident in 2008. And I realized after not long afterwards, a couple months afterwards, that actually my neighbor, I after about 3 months, I communicated with them with her through a Ouija board, but I could really understand how he had just shed everything, and how much I really could feel how much he was in a beautiful place. And then I could look backwards in time, because there is no time where it was, but it was just because of that beautiful moment, more than about 10 years earlier, that we'd met, and that was such a spiritual moment that I was like, wow, that's what a coincidence. Like the coincidence to me was a spiritual moment. But then I re-saw it in a different way of viewing him against the setting sun as just the unrepeatable, priceless spirit gift that after that, and then really with the Ouija board, just seeing how he's in the spirit, that it was a real blessing. I mean, it's just nothing that I could have a choice about.
Oh, Kathleen, that is so beautiful. And, you know, we are at the point of being out of time. Can you believe that? Isn't it interesting? We're talking about time and timelessness.
Right.
So we will be bringing all of this and inviting divine imagination into the realms that we share next month. So I invite every single one of you to mark your calendars and be with us next month as we enter those realms that relate to Site 3, divine imagination. We'll weave it with Site 2, faith and trust. We'll weave that with Site 1, 1.5. I mean, we're weaving, it always transcends and includes, but what we're going to bring in more of next month is the involution as well as the evolution. Actually, we've been doing involution all through this experience so far. Most people don't talk about that in the evolutionary circles. In fact, when I bring it up, it's almost like an allergy. So we are.
Oh, I'm sorry but my typing was slow. I'd started to type in a message. I broke my wrist. And actually I was thinking about my brother recently, and then we're wondering why he couldn't get out quickly from where he was. And I wonder whether he broke his wrist. I don't know that I'll ever know, but I have this feeling. But about something that came up a couple minutes ago of anybody, because Unity of Tustin and so many other churches were figuring out how to be like a holacracy, ministry centered rather than minister centered, is we're learning about how to do it week by week. But I think part of it is, if anybody has ideas of who we'd really like to have come and be speakers at Unity of Tustin in this new world, and that would really work for us, that the board or the events team, anybody that's in leadership, bring it up so we can see what we can do to make it happen. But it's like, it's not up to like a certain people to figure it out and a certain people to make it happen. It's all of us getting the divine cues and like working as a holacracy to make things happen.
And congratulations to Kathleen. She was recently elected to the board of directors. So yes. And it's time for us to go to Liebestrom, our wonderful closing theme that Carol and Richard actually recorded for us at the very beginning of Called by Love. So let's go to Liebestrom, and I look forward to seeing all of you next month on our monthly call, and just sending you so much love, so much gratitude, so many blessings.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Marj.
And thank you, Fabienne.